Thank you, Mary.
Thank
Take it
you.
away.
Thank you, Travis. When Travis and Brian were talking and we couldn't see them, I thought, oh, maybe that's like God talking to us. It was so cool. Wow, thanks for coming out on a gorgeous night. I kind of wish like it was raining or something so it'd be easier to be inside. So as Travis mentioned, I've been a counselor. Yeah, I think this is year 33. And but that doesn't always prepare us for being parents, doesn't it? I have, next week I've been married for 30 years, next Tuesday, so that's kind of cool, to a great guy. And we have 3 awesome children, young adults, and then the best part of our life, we have a new granddaughter. So I'm pretty sure I love her more than anybody, so that's just awesome. So tonight, I'm just going to share some things with you. Take what works, and if I say something dumb, just leave it here. But I'm hoping there might just be a couple things that maybe just connect with you. So when Travis and I were thinking about this, I guess first I have to ask, how many are parents to like 5 and under? Okay, you guys just deserve to sleep. And I can't see like super good, so like anybody at home too, yeah, if you have those little ones, just take a nap because you are tired. Okay, then who's got those fun elementary kids? Oh yeah, we kind of love them. And then who's got those middle school and high school kids? Yeah, you deserve to drink. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if that's allowed in a church, but if you do crack something open, I like no judgment, because, God bless you. Yeah. My last client tonight was an 8th grader. So the session kind of went something like this. How was your day? Fine. Yeah. Oh, what were some of the really good parts? Nothing. Oh, any hard thing? Nope. Pretty excited to be here? I don't know. Luckily, I remember they liked chips, and I had some chips. Food always helps. So, okay, we started with that. And then we got into, if you could just tell me about your very perfect day, what would it be like? And who would be there? So there'd be a cute boy, no parents. She'd be shopping all day. And anyway, she just went into this beautiful conversation. Then the tears came, and we talked about the hardest thing that she's dealing with in her life at home. But I had to love that. I don't know, nothing. It's okay. I love one-word answers. Gotta love those smelly, sweet middle schoolers. So when we're talking about parenting, we have 2 primary emotions, all of us do, and they're love or fear. And all of our emotions channel through love and fear. So I just want you to think about that a little bit when we think about how we parent. And I'll have parents say, well, I don't ever parent out of fear. And I'm like, wow, awesome, good for you. So I'll say, but do you ever do this? Does your parenting ever look angry or irritable or stressed? Or do you ever parent out of exhaustion? Or where you're overwhelmed? Do you ever parent out of sarcasm? Or belittling? Or threats? Or yelling? That's parenting out of fear. And we've all been there. Then I'll say, so what does loving look like? So if we're parenting out of love, patience, humor, we have more teaching moments than correcting. We allow time to pause. We have time for gentleness. We'll circle back and try again. So that would be my first thing I would just encourage all of us to think about, like tonight when you put your kids to bed. Okay, am I parenting out of love or fear? So I brought this little pink blanket because you know who are the experts on parents or on parenting? all those people that just got this gift but never have used it. Aren't they just the wisest people of all? My background was child development, my master's in counseling. I was just going to kick butt at parenting. And then they handed me one. I was like, wow, I think I parented out of fear that first night because I was tired. That childbirth, that's not really a fun process. Wow. But so I just love this because this represents all that goodness, all those hopes and dreams, all that expertise. So sometimes we have to spend a little time talking about the dreams we had for our family compared to the reality, and sometimes there's a little bit of a loss. It's kind of like being married or really anything significant. We expect this ta-da, and then life starts to happen. So it's okay if you dreamed this and this is your reality, because your reality can be incredible. It's just a whole lot messier, but messy can be wonderful. I didn't know if any of you had heard that song, Truth Be Told. If you haven't, look it up when you get home, Truth Be Told by Matthew West. It is phenomenal. It just speaks to me. It just came out this summer, but it's about, I'm fine, yeah, I'm fine, yeah, I'm fine, but I'm not. And then there's this beautiful clip in there in the video, and it's a mom and her daughter, and they made a beautiful cake, and they did a selfie, and it's like, we're having the most perfect day. And then you turn around and you see the disaster in the kitchen. I was like, I wish she would have posted that, because we could have all been like, amen, we get that. But again, the reality is different than the dream. So what I wanted to talk about tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about ourselves, which I promise then will help with our parenting. Then next week, we're going to talk more about our kids, and then our third week, we're going to tie it all together with really specific parenting strategies. And again, I'm no expert. I can give you all my kids' phone numbers. They can tell you that. Although they have turned out to be amazing adults, which I think, praise to God for that. And they have a really cool father. But there's a gentleman, and his name is Brian Post, and he talks about 3 things. So here would be 3 things if you wanted to remember one thing about tonight. He says, first we have to reflect, and I'll go into that. The second, we have to relate. And the third thing we have to do is regulate. Reflect, relate, and regulate. And you know what, guys? When I figured this out, it 100% changed the way I parented. Because we're all going to have stress in our life. And wow, with COVID and amazing families teaching from home, so stress is unavoidable. And it's actually necessary. We wouldn't get a lot of things done if we didn't have a little stress encouraging us. But it's when it turns to distress that's when it becomes a problem. Stress causes us either to be in a hyper or a hypoarousal state, like where we puff up or we shrink down. And if you can think about that, that's kind of based on our personalities. So some of us, when we're stressed, we're kind of like bears. We just get loud. And then we're in a hyper-aroused state. And then others, depending on our personality, we kind of shrivel up and we just, we kind of check out. We just get really overwhelmed. So I wanted to talk, this is kind of the only, hopefully the only too heady part with my brain. Travis reminded me that was a good humor right there. But so I have this little brain, and I do this with kids that I see in counseling, and actually I show it to adults. So I just want to talk about this. So this front part of your brain right here, and I talk to even little kids, this is our smartest part of our brain. And I see little 4-year-olds, and we talk about, where's your smartest part of our brain? Right here. So for us to parent, we have to be in this state. Because inside our brain is our limbic system. That's all of those emotions. Usually that's when our fear is kicking in. And then sometimes we are so stressed that we are operating from our brain stem. That's when we get into that fight, flight, or freeze. And that can even happen to us as parents. We are stressed, and we are just at the point where we are overwhelmed. It's kind of like that teapot, and it just goes off. But if you think about it, and if you can kind of remember, the only time we're effective parents is when we're functioning from this frontal cortex. You can even try this like on your spouse. I'll tell my husband, you are not like using the smartest part of your brain. Yeah, he doesn't always love when I point that out, but I think maybe he wants my help. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, you know what, we'll talk about it later when you're using your smartest part. And yeah, we have a little discussion at that point. But think about that. Are we using our smartest part of our brain? And we're going to get into that a little bit more. If we're functioning from our brain stem, our cortisol level is shooting up. And we need cortisol because what that helps us do is, like if you're driving a car and you get drowsy and you start pulling over to the side of the road, it helps you like be alert. Like cortisol helps us be alert. But if we are so stressed that that cortisol stays high, then it becomes we're in a state of distress, and then we become really reactive. And then we're either in that hyper-aroused where we're kind of just irritable, or we're just kind of like, you know what, I am checked out because I am way too overwhelmed. I don't know if any of you can ever relate to that. So we always want to use that healthy part of our brain. So I was trying to think of what being regulated, emotionally regulated looks like, where our cortisol is down and our oxytocin is up, because that's our calming hormone. So we're always trying to increase that. And I don't know if any of you watched the movie Mr. Rogers. It is a slow movie, but I thought, okay, Mr. Roger defines what it's like to be regulated. You know, he's just chill, but he's present, he's calm. He's not coming from a place of arousal, he's just attentive. So, you know, I'm always trying to look at kind of like a thermostat, not too high, not too low. And the way we can always tell with parenting if we're too high or too low is if a child says this and our response is here, that space means we're dysregulated. Or, you know, the house is on fire and we're still on the couch, that space means we're dysregulated. So think about that. You know, your child says, gosh, can I have a cookie? And we're like, wow. Whoa, where did that come from? That means we're dysregulated. That means this part of our brain needs more oxygen. It means that our thermostat is too high. So just keep your self in check. And you know what? We're going to get it wrong. But the beautiful thing about kids is they're forgiving. And then we always get that chance to get it right and to circle back. So I was thinking about perfectionism too. Because, you know, we sometimes, especially in this world of social media, I think we can have this desire to try and be perfect, have the perfect family. You know, I love first day of school pictures. You know what I so want is I want to see what's going on a half hour before that picture. You know, isn't that a riot? Or like a half hour before people walk into church. I mean, I have threatened, I have paid my children to be in pictures. I am like, and we are going to walk into church and I want everybody, you know, and I'm just like, and then we smile. Oh, hi. Yeah, we had a great morning. Yeah, phenomenal morning. So happy to be here. and then we get home, and then we pick up right where it left off, for about 5 minutes. It's like, okay, I got this, and then it's like, chaos. But when we try and sit with perfectionism, I loved this quote, that perfectionism's partners are shame and fear. So when we're trying to be perfect, it's really triggered in shame or fear, because we can't be perfect in relationships because we're imperfect people. So one time, a long time ago, I had a pastor bring a really dilapidated suitcase up on stage, and it was really big. And he said, today we're going to empty our baggage. And that has just stuck with me for years. So sometimes as parents, we have to sit with our own stuff. Because if we don't, we can unintentionally start pouring shame onto our kids. And we all have it. Sometimes it's a really big suitcase, sometimes it's a little one. Another way of saying it is, what are you carrying? In counseling, I'll give people a brick. Sometimes I'll give them a few bricks. And I'll say, tell me what you're carrying. Because unless we kind of look at our own stuff, we do pour it on our kids. And a humbling example of shame is when my youngest son was in high school. I think he was a sophomore, and then my daughter was a senior. So about 10 years ago, this event happened the night before, but the next day I'm leading a clinical meeting on how to work with children. And our high school principal calls, which I'm like, awesome, because he's a buddy of mine. He said, hey, I have to talk to you about your son. And I'm like, okay, like he must have got an award. And then how God just humbles you right at the right moments when you need it. And he said, hey, I don't know if you heard about that incident last night. Immediately I know this isn't about an award. And his voice is really serious, like, hey, Mary, this is, and he says his full name, not his first name. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's never good when a principal uses his whole name. And he said, your son is going to have out-of-school suspension this afternoon. I'm like, well, excuse me? And he said, last night, I know you didn't get to be at this event, but your son pushed a kid in the student section, and we have a policy where you can't have your hands on another student. And I immediately went to a place of shame, because shame is there's something wrong with me. Guilt is I did something wrong. Shame is there's something wrong with me. So how can I be having this clinical talk about children? How can I be talking to the principal and the person that was going to lead him in out-of-school suspension? Another friend of mine. Just love being humbled. So when he came home, I wasn't here. I wasn't using the smartest part of my brain. I'm like, what the heck? And he's like, Mom, this guy was calling our daughter Hannah, he was calling her names and making fun of how she looked in her volleyball uniform, and he was being so derogatory about girls. Okay, get that. Why'd you gotta push him, buddy? You know better than that. We've taught you better than that. Mom, he wouldn't shut up, and he was just saying bad stuff. So finally I just had enough, because you're not gonna talk about my sister that way. And he pushed him, and this boy, actually everybody conferred that that's what was going on. This boy got suspended for a week. Now my son is a social worker in Hennepin County, caring for people that can't use their own voice to advocate for themselves. But at the time, and now I just talked to him about this last week, said, hey, I'm going to present on this. You did the absolute right thing. But I'm sorry that triggered shame in me. And thank you for sticking up for your sister, and thank you for sticking up for girls. I love that. but being aware of when we are triggered in our own shame. I think that's just so powerful. And also spending a little time with, do we have some things that we have to unpack? Stuff from our childhood, stuff from relationships. It might be trauma, it might be an addiction, it might be, who knows what it is. We're all carrying something. But sometimes we ask of kids what we don't ask of ourselves. And our kids will never, ever remember our words, but they will remember our actions. So to kind of I love counseling kids, really just a riot. But my favorites are when the parents drop the child off and they're like, I'll be back in an hour. It's kind of like, you deal with them. And sometimes I'm like, hey, come on in. Let's talk about this as a family. Oh no, I'm fine, fix my child. And not that kids don't need a place to talk, but it's like, no, we got to talk about hard things as a family sometimes. Love or fear. So a few other comments about that is, when you look at your children, one thing I'd like you to kind of think about a little bit this week, especially those that have those little ones, if you're not taking a nap already, I want you to think of the difference between a tantrum and a meltdown. Actually, we can think of this with big kids too. But a tantrum is, I want that. A meltdown is, I'm so dysregulated and I'm very overwhelmed right now. And the reason that it's different, or it's important to look at it, is because we're going to respond differently. But if we're responding out of fear, we can't tell the difference. All we can tell is our child's not listening to us. But if we can come from a very loving place and say, whew, I wonder what's going on. So oftentimes it is more of a meltdown. And I don't know if you've spent time in an elementary school. It is a highly stimulating place. Daycares, holy cow. The lights and the noise, and I would be so overstimulated because now I'm old, and when I love going back and visiting. And then middle school, they're just unique all on their own. And they're trying to navigate friendships and classes and trying to be cool. And now they have to wear masks and they have makeup on. And oh my gosh, it's all so big. And then you have high schoolers. So I always try and think, okay, is this a tantrum? Or are they having a meltdown? And meltdown, I really try and come at from a very compassionate frame of mind. One time my daughter came home from school. I bet she talked 20 minutes. They love to sit on my counter and put the feet on the island so you can't walk around. And I just thought, okay, just listen. Bigger behavior, the quieter I need to be. And she talked, and she talked, and she talked. But when you have teens and they talk and it's bedtime or mealtime, you listen, because they just don't do it that often. And at the end, I'll never forget, I did not say one word except, Later, she came down and said, that was one of the best talks we've ever had. And I was like, really? I had all this knowledge to impart. But there's a saying that says, being listened to is so close to being loved that it's indistinguishable. So she was just heard. And if you think of when you are in high stress, do we want to be lectured at? Do we want to be told we were wrong or we should have done this? We just want to be heard. There's time for teaching later. When we're using our healthy part of our brain, our frontal cortex, our thinking part, our wisdom part, and our child is using their thinking, their wisdom part, impart all the knowledge you want. Pour it on them because they'll soak it up. But if you're functioning from your limbic system, high emotion, and your child is, here's the thing. They cannot hear one word we're saying. It's kind of like that old Charlie Brown, where the teacher is like, wonk, wonk, wonk. That's what it's like. So save your knowledge until you're regulated and they're regulated. So the higher your stress, the higher your child's stress, really the least amount of communication. It might just be, you know what, we're both going to take a break. And I used to think, no, this is when we have to teach. I have to teach them right now. You know what's so beautiful is the next day to say, you know what? You came home 10 minutes late. That's not okay. Think of that conversation the moment they walked in the door. It wouldn't have gone as well because maybe I was dysregulated. They might have known they were in trouble. Go to bed. We'll talk about it tomorrow. Or a child breaks something. We got to pick it up. We can always talk about it later. You know, wait until you're regulated like a thermostat at that 70 degrees. And then wait for your child to be there too. That's when they will receive your wisdom. There's another couple things I wanted to talk about, and then I'm going to have Travis come up, and he's going to kind of walk us through the small group discussion. There's a saying called foreboding joy, and another word for it is we dress rehearse tragedy. And what that means is if your child is going through a tough time, we can start to think that they're always going to go through a tough time. You know, really, their little brain doesn't develop. It's even grown like 25 to 27 years old. So just because you're having a rough moment now, more than likely they are just going to work through that. You know, it's kind of like a garden. You got to kind of keep taking the weeds out. You got to keep watering. You got to keep planting. You got to keep nourishing. But just because you're in a hard season with them does not mean that it'll last forever. So for the very last thing I wanted to talk about, homework, see, we'll just be like the kids. I want you to think of a time in your day that is where you're the most dysregulated. You're functioning from that limbic system. So it might be bedtimes. It might be mornings. It could be meal times, getting ready for school, picking them up from school because you're tired, you know, you've had a busy day. I want you to think of just one time because, you know, we can't tackle it all at the same time. So everybody, I just want you to pick one time. And then I want our goal this week is pay attention to how you're feeling. And then I just want you to practice just breathing, not saying anything, but the deepest breath you can possibly take. Because what that does is it gets oxygen to our frontal cortex, it calms our cortisol, it releases our oxytocin, and breathing and pausing and deep breaths. Because otherwise, when we're stressed, we do this really shallow breathing. Deep breaths and just perspective and think, okay, this too shall pass. You know, say a quick prayer and then watch how you respond to your kids. I almost can promise you'll respond differently compared to if you're dysregulated. So that's all I want you to do this week. Know that you're doing an amazing job, knowing that none of us get it right all the time, that kids forgive us. But pick one stressful time, and for these next 6 to 7 days, okay, how am I feeling? Deep breaths, pause, fewer words, be planful. So if it's a car ride, do I have snacks? Do I have water? Because I want my kids to be regulated. Do I have things set out in the morning? If it's bedtime, make sure and go back and look at them once they're asleep, because aren't they so dang cute? oh my gosh, and then they wake up and then we're like, okay, we can do this, but they are cute when they're asleep. Just love on them. Every single night, go look at them. And then just remember, like, this is wonderful and messy and imperfect, but boy, there's beauty in it. So, Travis, come on up and walk us through the next step.
Awesome. Can we put it up for Mary?